Hey friends, welcome back. My name is Jason. We are joined by my friend Ben from across the pond from TRC Outdoors, and we are discussing WROL, without rule of law, and what it means to actually be in a situation like that. And more importantly, we're going to discuss what we can possibly do in the event that should occur in a town near you. So, really quickly, Ben, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Ben. I served for 15 years in the British Army as an infantry officer. And when I left the military, I went out contracting in all the most delightful sandy places around the world. And then I was what's called a crisis manager. So I worked for an insurance company who did some very specialized insurance. We did things like kidnap and ransom. We negotiated for ships that had been pirated, and we also were responsible for something that was known as political evacuation. And that was my particular niche, and that is when countries go to, as we say over here, a ball of chalk, and keeping it PG. Um, Someone would deploy in order to pull out people that were needed to be pulled out. So I did a lot of that during the Arab Spring. I was in Libya during the Civil War, doing some work there with getting Western oil workers out. I was in Mali during their coup. I've got some up close and personal experience of what states that are without rule of law actually look like. So, hoping I can sort of share some of that experience and have a chat and have a look at what one could actually expect should the worst happen in the West.
You've got a ton of experience in places that have kind of fallen apart, and you can definitely provide a lot of insight into what that might look like. And a lot of people, because the world is getting weirder by the minute, it's getting crazier by the minute, and there's chaos breaking out everywhere, and a lot of Americans are concerned that that might come our way in the near future. And I want to not I never want to spread fear, and I never want to, promote that way of thinking. And I don't want people to be afraid. I want people to live their lives to the fullest and continue to live happy, healthy lives and have barbecues and cookouts with their neighbors and friends. I don't want people to, like, lock the doors and hide inside. I want them to be prepared. And the more prepared that we are, the more we can freely go about living our lives. So but before we go on to what we can actually do to be prepared for something like this, I want you to kind of paint a picture for us of what it potentially might look like. There's an endless amount of reasons why we might be without the rule of law, right? There's who knows, from the EMPs to the attacks to the whatever, you name it. There's lots of reasons why this could happen. But what would it really look like if you went from a fairly functional society like the US, and you could call 911 if you needed help, and the ambulance could be on its way? What would it look like in those initial stages, based on your experiences, if that was to suddenly just go away?
I think the first thing really to talk about is what actually is the rule of law, so you can understand what not having the rule of law looks like, because I don't think it actually looks like what people expect. So if you're talking like within the prepper community and the way it's discussed, I think people are expecting this kind of Mad Max analog.
All right, like the Purge
Um,
movies, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and all of this kind of thing. But actually, the Purge movies are kind of nearer to it than anything. So,
Okay.
when you're talking about the rule of law, what you're really referring to is a society that's got governance which has accountability, just law, open government, and it's accessible, and your justice is impartial. Now, when that stops, you're without rule of law. So really what you're looking at as kind of a precursor is when you have a emerging political class that really sees that the rules don't count for them. You could actually be edging into a situation where you're without the rule of law, without the lights going out. without the supermarkets not having stuff on the shelves.
Hmm.
You're talking about essentially you're talking about tyranny. It's all the good stuff that the founding fathers over there decided that the Second Amendment was for, and all of that kind of thing, and why you guys have your constitution in place, to protect the rights, to ensure that accountability, that just law, that open government, and that accessibility. And there's always going to be people in the political class that take Orwell as a playbook rather than a warning. And they're looking at that, they're looking at what they can get away with. And,
Right.
I'm sure we can all look at people in power currently around the world, even, and I say this as an outsider, even in the United States, and you can say there's some issues along the way
Sure.
there. Now, where it really starts falling apart is where that government then becomes super, super heavy-handed and they start trying to really directly control the people to the extent that the normal functions of society can't continue. So the farmers can't get in the fields, they can't truck the food out, the supermarkets don't fill up,
Supply
and
chains break
that's what
down. Right.
and that's when society really starts to break down. Now, you guys had Hurricane Katrina over there,
Hmm.
and I think that really is your best paradigm to look at what would happen with a breakdown within the continental United States. The supplies couldn't get in, the law enforcement that was there weren't able to cope, the gangs were running rife. The thing that kept people safe was when they posseed up in their neighborhoods,
Yeah.
formed small local militias to guard themselves. You had the horrendous goings on in the stadium with the gang rapes and the thievery and the brutal assaults and all the other things that were going on there. We've seen it even in the UK. A few years ago, we had widespread rioting through many of the cities in the United Kingdom. Um, on the thinnest of excuses. You've seen it yourself in the United States, where there were some very unsavory people who used the Black Lives Matters movement
Right.
as a way of just proving that they really didn't have much to offer society as a wider whole. You know, raiding and looting shops and impoverishing people in their own communities.
Hmm.
So after Katrina, the British government had a look at what would happen in a similar kind of situation in the UK. And the report had a fantastically exciting title, where it was called 3 Days from Anarchy. And basically, it's looking at how fragile Western society is because of supply chain management. So at any given time, in the West, our supply chain has about 3 days worth of food in it.
Right.
So generally, you think in threes, it's like the rule of threes in survival, isn't it?
Right.
But you go back to the rule of threes in terms of society, most people have about 3 days food in the house. The
Hmm.
supermarkets have about 3 days food in them. The supply chain has about another 3 days food in it,
Right.
just sitting around because, there's an awful lot of us. We need an awful lot of consumables.
Right.
It is very, very fragile. On top of that, we've got power networks that are being very much taxed because we are increasingly huge consumers of electricity. But we have governments that are wanting to establish their green credentials and are investing in methods of power production that aren't perhaps the most robust and reliable. You've only got to look at Texas,
Yeah.
winter before last, where all the wind turbines froze up and they had brownouts across the state.
Yeah.
It's not something that's a million miles away. It's not something that can happen in somewhere that's very, very sandy and hot a long, 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 long way off.
Yeah.
Really, what we're talking about is in terms of kind of the prepping is we're looking at less about without rule of law because, things can still function, but you are effectively living under a tyranny. Or we are in the kind of thing that we're looking at is what you would probably more accurately describe as a failed state. So that's where, the state's ability to fulfill its security and developmental functions, its economic functions have all utterly failed.
Right.
There is no control, there is no um there's no one organizing anything. And that's really where you start getting into Mad Max territory.
Now, in your experience, have you found this to be, in most places that you've been, have you found this to be a relatively temporary type thing where there's like an explosion of chaos and then it kind of calms and settles back down and kind of finds a balance of some sort, or what?
It can vary. Let's look at some examples. Because what tends to happen is we try to look at things in a binary fashion. There's this thing, and then there's this thing. But what actually happens is there's this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing. So if you look at what we had in Libya, for example, without rule of law before the civil war, so you had a tyrannical government, albeit that people were well educated, well housed, it had a functioning health service, and the quality of life there generally was quite a lot better than it was an awful lot of other places around that continent. What happened was they eventually decided to rise up against the tyranny, and then the country split. Now, what happened on top of that was then the West decided they needed to become involved. Absolutely nothing to do with the fact that Libya sits on the largest deposit of light sweet crude oil in the world. Nothing to do with that whatsoever. So, what you had then was a conflict that couldn't burn out on its own. And you had this regime change being pushed without any kind of political element. Literally, you had countries in the West independently doing what, well, not just the West, but from around the place as well. Um, you had like the French were just flying into desert airfields and unloading armored cars and just saying, have at it. Hilux Technicals coming off the back of aircraft full of ammo crates saying a present from the people of Bahrain. Or no, not Bahrain, Qatar. There we go, the Qataris. There was Qatari special forces running all over the bloody place.
It's like a free
Um,
for all.
yeah, it was a free for all. And then you had the Islamist militias pushing up from the south into the country as well. So you've got all of these factions. I mean, large homogenous countries are a social construct of the 20th century. I mean, they've, you always, they've always sort of risen and fallen. Look at Europe. Europe until, the 1600s, 1700s was a series of city states,
Right.
what could easily be governed. We had the Roman Empire before that, but before that, that fell to pieces because it was too big to be
Hmm.
governed. And the schism with the turn to Christianity didn't help either there.
If something becomes too big, it becomes harder to manage. And then
Yeah.
what a lot of people are talking about, and potentially in the US, is civil wars and things of that nature, and then vulcanization, where it breaks off into and starts to
Yeah.
look a little bit more like Europe, where there's a large landmass but broken up into a lot of different countries.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, you really already have that.
Right.
You just don't recognize it because you all speak the same language, all use the same currency,
Yeah.
you all drive on the same side of the road, yada, yada, yada. And
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are a series of states, of independent states. They all have a head of state, a governor. They all have a state legislature with elected representatives. There's a certain amount that's done for those states. You are a continental country
Yeah.
that's made up of a series of smaller nations already.
Hmm. True. Yeah. Very true.
So state that's broken up, going back to the actual point, like in Libya. So you had a lot of different things going on. and no coherent strategy, really, because the people that were saying we've had enough really didn't have a plan. They just wanted this to go away.
They just had enough of something and wanted something to happen to make it go
Yeah,
away. So do you foresee like a warlord type situation happening, like where biggest, toughest guy on the block takes over the area? Not
yeah,
physically biggest, toughest, but most powerful politically kind of deal?
yeah, absolutely. So if we look at a failed state, a well-recognized failed state, let's look at Afghanistan. At the moment, it is the Taliban are in control. So that's to say they've taken the seat of government, they're sitting there and they're talking and saying things to other countries. You get out in the boonies, you know, that hasn't changed in thousands of years.
Right.
That's going to be about the family. That's about the tribe.
Yeah.
That's about, they have rule of law. It's Sharia. It's there. It's something that they've accepted. Let's go to another model in the West, in the United States, was the territories before they became states. When they were starting to grow, you had towns that were based around some kind of infrastructure, be it a mine, be it a logistics node like a railhead, that kind of thing, somewhere that was a natural place for cattle drives to come into, something like that. That was again, elected mayor. You had rules. You elected a sheriff. Um, it's a very similar situation. You had rule of law, but there was no overarching state to it.
Right.
Um, you had massive disruption from criminal gangs
Hmm.
who were there's your warlords.
Would you agree that the urban areas, the cities, are going to most likely be heavily affected by such events? The further you get from those areas, the rural areas like where I live, for example, much less effect, and my life is still gonna. I'm still gonna have to go get the chicken's eggs. I'm still gonna have to go do the jobs
Mhm.
and still provide for my family and all that. And I'll probably be significantly less affected by some of these events.
Yes,
Yeah.
up until a point,
Hmm.
and that point is when they need to supply the cities, and then they need people to do the work. So, we'll go back to Afghanistan. You've got the farmers there. They're doing their thing. They're trying to feed their families and the rest of it. And then the warlords, the Taliban, whoever it is that's the big nasty in the area, he comes around and he takes his tithe,
Takes his cut. Yeah.
takes his cut. Yeah, exactly.
Got to pay the
Um,
taxes. You'll never escape taxes.
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can never escape
we're going to be
taxes.
paying taxes to somebody regardless. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
who,
exactly. And whether
big
that's
government or
that's a
not.
barter system or whether that's cash money,
Yeah.
um, that's something entirely different. But yeah, you'll always have to pay the man.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side of that, your warlord has a vested interest in protecting his territory and the people in his territory. So,
Sure.
it's a scale and a balance. But if you're in an area and you've got a decent sized community that looks out for itself, I mean, like we were discussing the Church of the Latter-day Saints, biggest mag in the world, right?
Right. Yep.
You know, um, that's the kind of situation you're looking at, really. They've got a large organization. They're going to be able to band together. They're going to be able to look out for each other. And it's this whole thing that you keep seeing um, in the whole prepper fiction, and people think that they're going to be this lone wolf survivor, this
Yeah.
person that's just going to head off into the woods ad infinitum. It's
Yeah.
not going to happen. I mean, have you ever read Jeremiah Johnson?
Yes.
So, my big takeaway from that was the guy, yeah, he was out in the mountains, he was really self-sufficient and all the rest of it, but he was still coming back for flour. He was still coming
Yeah.
back to town for salt
Yeah.
and all of these kind of things, the kind of stuff you just can't do on your
Yeah.
own.
Yeah, I say that all the time. The lone wolf, I mean, you'll might do okay for a little while, but eventually you're going to run out of something and you need something from somebody else, or you're going to break your leg, or something's going to happen and you're going to be, if you don't have a community of people that you can trust and rely on, you're going to be You're gonna be in a bad spot.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to sleep at some point, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And theoretically, you got to sleep at some point. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you've painted a pretty good picture of what it could potentially look like.
Mhm.
Now, what's more important to me is I want to talk about what we can do to be prepared for such events. I think that people need to have a secure stockpile of food set aside for hard times if they need to lay low for a bit. And the grocery stores are out, like you said, we've got 3 day supply, and that's pretty
Mhm.
much it. And any little hiccup in the system can cause that supply to break down, and then suddenly the grocery stores are empty. And then what?
Mhm.
So I think that we should have some food set aside, a steady water supply that you know you can get water from, because if the water stops flowing into your house, then what? A lot of people, I'd
Mhm.
say the majority of Americans do not have a plan for that.
Mhm.
You ask anybody that lives in an urban, suburban type area, and you say, "Hey, water stops flowing to your house. You've got public water supply. What do you do for your next drink of water?" And a lot of people do not have any sort of solution for that problem.
The other thing I think is you really do need to form that community.
Yeah, agreed.
As soon as it's like it is, it's a bit of a catch-22 in that you don't want people to know that you're prepared
Right.
because there will be some scumbag that comes and takes it off you or
Yeah.
tries to.
Right.
But if you've got that community and that community's prepared and you can band together, then when the what do they call them? The zombie bikers come by,
Zombie. I like to call them lesbian zombie pirates.
lesbian zombie pirates. Whatever you want to come for. What's the
They
book?
are.
Is it
They're terrifying.
I think one of the best pieces of prepper fiction I've ever read, I think, is 1 Second After.
One second up. I don't think I've read that one.
Trying to remember it. I've probably got the title wrong, but basically, what happens is someone detonates an airburst nuke, right? EMP knocks out the grid completely.
Hmm.
Um, and without the grid, you know, that is failed state time straight away.
Sure.
And it's the book is about a community. It's basically a gated community, gated middle class, gated suburban fringe community that comes together, and how they come together as a community, how they look after each other. They have the mutant zombie bikers who come in, trying to take stuff away, and how they manage that. And it's one of these things. It's not like one of these books where everyone is actually all of a sudden a retired member of SEAL Team 6 Delta Force,
Right.
whatever, like it like happens in a lot of the fiction. It's not like I love his books, but it's not like Jerry Young where he's got, enough to restart civilization in a hidden cave underneath his house.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. But it's much more real, I
Yeah.
think, that one.
Yeah.
More so than Rawlinson's work. But I think that one is particularly good,
Yeah.
especially when they've got a member of the community that decides to defect to the zombie bikers and all this.
Yeah.
Great read, go for it, do
Yeah.
it. But that,
No.
that's more realistic about what a failed state would look like.
Gotcha.
You've got a very strong gang culture in urban areas in the United States. If you are on the suburban fringe, they're going to be there
Yeah.
uh, as soon as, if only just to run away with your big flat screen TV. And the other thing that you really can't discount is the mob. And the mob is a very dangerous thing. I talk to my boys about this because they're sort of hairy teenagers and they're getting into the side of thing where going into London is cool and all the rest of it. And one of the things we saw during the London riots was that people were very easily, and I'm sure it was the same in the kind of rioting that went along with the Black Lives Matter thing in the United States, was that there were people that were pulled along with it. So, we had people like breaking into sports shops and running away with expensive sneakers and flat screen TVs and big bags of frozen chicken from Kentucky Fried Chicken and stuff like that. Even being so blazing as sitting in the street trying shoes on. But in the years following it, because we're probably one of the most surveyed or surveillanced or surveilled, whatever the word is, lots of cameras in London. nations in the world, they tracked them down and they arrested them.
Wow.
And these were people that were like bank clerks and school teachers and just office workers. They'd never so much as got a speeding ticket.
But they just got caught up in the chaos and the excitement
They
of the
got
event.
caught up in the chaos.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have that chaos and it's going to be there and there's going to be a lot of damage. There's going to be a lot of destruction. I mean, we've seen the mob. It's terrible. You go to Europe in the 1930s, in Germany with the rise of the Nazis. Kristallnacht, for example, that was the mob. Did those people truly believe it? No, they were, vast majority of them were just pulled along.
Hmm.
And it's what happens. And there's always people that have been brought up to feel like the world owes them everything and that they're special and it all should just be given to them. And if it's not given to them, then they'll just go take it because they've never suffered a consequence in their life.
I think that the world is full of maybe a couple groups of people, two groups of people, those that will do their best to do the right thing, regardless of what's going on around them, and those that will probably take advantage of a situation if it presents itself. People may or may not know which side of that fence that they're on until it actually happens. It might be so tempting to run into that store with everybody else because there's no chance of ever getting caught. I could run out of there with that flat screen TV and get away with it scot free. And you've never been presented with that opportunity, so you don't know that you take it. But I like to believe that I'd like to believe, I don't know if this is true or not. In your experience, you can let me know, but I would like to believe there's just as many good people out there that will help people in need and they will do the right thing regardless, as there is the people that will take advantage of it and hurt other people just because they can get away with it. I don't know. In your experience, what do you think in those places that you've been? Is there a ratio that you can kind of, you know, you could point out?
The thing is, it will get to the point where you're going to do what you got to do for you and yours.
Sure.
And so, this is why I go back to that community
Yeah.
and the strength of putting that community together. I go back to those communities in New Orleans after Katrina. If you go back to um, the Korean shopkeepers in LA, they got together to protect what was theirs and look after what was theirs.
Right.
And I think that's something you're going to see. You're going to see a societal fracture, and it's going to be that is going to be along lines of faith, lines of race.
I said birds of a feather are always going to try to flock
Yeah,
together, right? And that's just
yeah.
it's just human nature. That's just going to be the way it is. You're gonna gravitate towards people of like mind. They look like you, they talk like you, they walk like you, and you're going to feel safe and feel comfortable being surrounded by people like you.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm not advocating that we're going to end up with like, one group is going to go out and,
Sure.
try and take over the world
Yeah,
and what
yeah,
have you. But you're going to find that your communities that are going to form are going to be along those lines.
yeah. One of the biggest questions that I get a lot when we come up upon this subject is we always say community, community, community. That's one of the things that
Mhm.
gets preached a ton. And one of the biggest questions that gets asked is how do you start building a community like that? And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's one of the more difficult things to do. Anybody can go out and buy rice and beans and bullets and all the things and stockpile that stuff away, but it's very difficult to build a strong community of like-minded individuals. I shouldn't say it's difficult. It requires time and energy and effort, and you've got to, like you were saying, a lot of preppers don't like to expose themselves as preppers, right? They
Mhm.
don't want anyone to know that they're doing this. And it's like you're breaking rule number one, never talk about Fight Club, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't expose yourself and become a slightly vulnerable, then you'll
Mhm.
never ever get to meet some of these like-minded individuals, and the chances of you building some sort of community that you can count on in hard times is nil.
I think if you live in small town America, then the community is pretty much there. Um, you know, um, so obviously my my knowledge of small town America is Hollywood deep. But you
Yeah.
know, you've got communities that are already there. They're already formed. You've already got family groups that are there. You already know who the troublemakers are. You
Yeah.
know,
Valid point.
you're
Yep.
going to be able to be a lot more robust in dealing with them. Um, and you know, you're certainly sufficient for a number of things. You've probably already got a doctor and a nurse there. There's probably a dentist. There's a school. You know, you've got local government. You've got a sheriff's department. That kind of thing. That community is already there. If you live in an urban or suburban area, much harder because you know you can form your community, but you are drops in a pond. I mean that guy that is 2 or 3 miles away and his family that you get on very well with and you think you're going to be able to look after each other, that 3 miles could be 300.
It might as well be across the country. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
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 So you know that's going to be very difficult as well. It, it's interesting.
It's not that you shouldn't though. Just because
No,
there's a little bit
absolutely.
of distance, you should still try to build up that community. Don't just give up because there's some distance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you know that's where you know you're looking at your bugging out plan to a certain extent. You know, is your community going to locate to a place?
Right.
Would you invest in, you know, as a community, as a group, would you invest in some property? You know,
Right.
some rural property, you know, where you've got some hunting cabins.
Because bugging out to nowhere is not an answer. It's not a plan.
No,
Yeah.
no. Yeah. And I tell you, you know, we could have a fantastic conversation about bugging out, especially with the difference in the United Kingdom
Right.
and that, you know, you guys have got an awful lot of nothing um, in the United States still, whereas in the United Kingdom, you're never more than 20 miles from the coast. You know,
Right.
you're never more than an hour's walk from a city.
Yeah.
The only bits that aren't lived in the United Kingdom aren't for very good reason. But
Yeah.
yeah, you do, you know, and it's yeah, the whole concept of bugging out is you are absolutely right. You've got to have somewhere to go to. It's that logistics planning. It's the 4Ds. You know, it's your distance, your destination, your duration, and then demand. You know, when you get there on your resources, you can do some great logistics planning just off those 4Ds.
Hmm.
But yeah, you do need to have somewhere to go, and you know, all communities need something to go around. So if you're not, you know, having the benefit of that small town America rural community or what have you, then you know you are looking at having to up sticks and go somewhere else, I would say, in the United States. To try and do something like that in a city is going to be, you know, next to impossible, especially because that's where any kind of governmental remnant is going to be.
Right.
And, you know, there's one thing that when things go sideways, there's one thing that all governments want, and that's more control, more power. COVID showed us that, didn't it? You know, we were lucky in the United Kingdom in that we had some elected officials who were of a very libertarian nature and insisted on sundown clauses being written into all legislation, so that it would absolutely, you know, it would absolutely expire at any given time rather than it and have to be reenacted with a vote rather than just being able to be extended, you know. But those people are few and far between these days.
Right.
So, you know, we would, in a city, it would be very difficult, I think, because, you know, you try and get your community together, you know, you're a threat, especially if you posse up for mutual
Yeah.
protection, mutual defense.
Yeah. Whether you're a legitimate threat or not, you're most likely going to be viewed as one and squished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when the National Guard was able to roll into New Orleans, eventually to restore order, you know, they were in there loaded for bear
Yeah.
because they knew what was going on.
Right. Having a plan. If you live in an
Mhm.
urban area, my heart goes out to you. You need to have a plan. That is why I don't live in an urban area. For that, well, a lot of reasons why I don't live in an urban area, but that's one big one.
Mhm.
I just can't stand all the people being around me all the time. You know what my idea of freedom is? My idea of freedom is where I can walk outside anywhere on my property and go pee, take a leak, and no one can see me. That's that's freedom.
Yeah.
If you can't do that, it's you're not free. What you were saying is absolutely right. I think you got to have some sort of plan. You got to have some sort of community of people that you can trust and rely on. And it starts with you, in my opinion. I always say community starts with you. And if you want to surround yourself with quality human beings, it's got to start with you. You need to become the man that you want all the people around you to be. And I have found in my experience, the more I'm striving to be better and to be stronger and to be just more well rounded, and the more I care about other people, the more of those types of people come towards me. And it just happens like just organically. Like it's not forced. It's not like I'm actively going out there trying to form these MAGA groups. It's just me being me and I'm doing my thing and living my life and I just want to be a better person and I seem to attract good people when I do such things. Have you experienced things of that nature in your life?
Yeah, yeah. As a young officer, I was given a very similar piece of advice by a much grizzled colour sergeant from the parachute regiment, um, and he said to me, his advice to me was show them the man they want to be.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yep.
he was talking about commanding troops, but and I think that whole concept of living a righteous life, living a just life. I mean, one of the things that my boys growing up absolutely hated hearing from me. One of my stock epithets was, the hardest thing to do is the right thing when no one's looking.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's true. I mean, it's very easy to get resentful because you do see the people that cut corners rising to the top.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, um, being a good person and having that warm fuzzy feeling doesn't buy a Porsche.
Sure.
But at the same time, like you say, it rewards you in other ways, and that is by the people that you do have around you and the
Yeah.
people that gravitate to you,
Yeah, and
because they're the
define.
same kind of people, and they're looking for they're just as tired as you are of the scumbags, and
Yeah.
they want to be around the good people as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I define wealth different than a lot of people. A lot of people define wealth as successful businesses and fancy cars and big houses and all of that. And while I'm not knocking any of that, and more power to you if you're striving to get that stuff. I define wealth by the people around me, my family and my friends. And I'm extremely wealthy and I feel very wealthy because I have a lot of people that care and love me. And that to me is so much more valuable than any car or giant big mansion. I'll trade all that crap for the people in my life.
Yeah, my grandfather was an Irish immigrant to the United Kingdom, and he grew up in poverty in Liverpool. And and he when we had like family gatherings, when we were when the whole family was together, and it was like Christmas or something special like that, he would always say, "I wonder what all the poor people are doing." And I always took it as because he was a very witty guy
Yeah.
that he was making a joke, but actually, maybe that was his interpretation of wealth.
Hmm. That's it. Yeah, I think that's almost certainly. I think I would have gotten along well with your grandfather. He sounds like a great dude.
Yeah, he was a hell of a character.
Yeah.
Should I say.
Well, that's great, man. I just everybody watching, guys, I just want to encourage you again, like we stated in the beginning, to not live your lives in fear. Live your lives to the fullest and be the men and women that you want everyone around you to be. And if we do that, you will be surrounded by amazing people. And when the hardships come, because inevitably they will. It may not be today or tomorrow, might not be next week or next year, but inevitably they're going to come. You're going to be so much better off, and
Mm.
your stress level is going to be lower, and you're just going to be able to continue your life as you wish, as opposed to however the man deems it.
And I think the other thing is it's just it's very easy because of how connected we are all the time to get caught in the hype.
Mm,
And I certainly see it in prepper communities in Europe and like online groups and things like that, Facebook pages. When I see it in the UK and within Europe, there's an awful lot of people are getting massively hyped and worried about everything all the time because, of course, Ukraine's not that far away from us.
It's like throw a rock. It's right there.
Yeah, and you know, for people like me, when I joined the army, we were getting set to fight the bloody Russians, and all of a sudden, all that stuff I was doing as an 18-year-old soldier is almost now relevant again.
Hmm.
I can name my Russian armored vehicles quite happily. And all that kind of thing. But it's very easy to get caught in that kind of hype, and especially where in Europe now, um, we've got we've got governments starting to recognise the fragility that we were discussing at the top of this conversation. I think the Swedish government recently told all of their people, you all want to be prepping.
Yeah.
You'd be laying stuff into your house.
Yeah.
Uh, the British government has kind of quietly put some stuff out there, but we're British. We can't possibly panic. Stiff upper lip. Can't be doing that. Can't possibly, no. Prideful behaviour. Can't be having that. But it's something that people are a lot more conscious about now. Certainly when I drive through Europe, and you see some of these medieval fortified villages, you think, yeah, yeah, they're sorted. They,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're
Yeah. Yeah.
going
They
to
got
be
a
fine.
plan.
Yeah, they're going to plan. They just got to shut the doors. They'll be
That's
fine.
it. Yeah. Shut the doors and let the world go by. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, where
Well,
I live here, I've got 10 miles one way is a large town. 10 miles the other is another large town. I'm smack bang in between them, but because it's Britain, also smack bang in between them is a castle,
yeah.
and that's going to be my castle.
You'll be
Got a
Lord
moat
of
and a
the Manor.
drawbridge and everything.
That's right. Hey, something to look forward to. That's gonna be
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Lord Ben O'Toole.
Yeah, exactly. Did you know I actually already am? I
You're a
am. I
Lord.
am. I
Wow,
am.
really?
I'm the Laird of Glencairn,
Yeah.
which is a Scottish title.
Okay.
In Scotland, titles are linked to ownership of land, rather than family things. So the Laird of Glencairn. So what happened was they wanted to put a freeway through this dude's estate. So he thought, I'm not having that. So he started selling off parts of his estate.
Uh-huh.
And so when they came through and they said, well, we're just going to compulsory purchase it from you, when they discovered that they then had to compulsory purchase it not from him, but from thousands of people in all sorts of different countries around the world, that freeway became a bypass. So I am the lord of a piece of land about that big,
Like a square foot.
like a square foot in Scotland. But it means I can use the
Oh,
title.
you're kind of a big deal.
Oh,
Yeah.
kind of a big deal, yeah. I've
Yeah,
got
I'm
a
gonna tell
certificate and
people I
everything.
know I know a Lord. That's great. Well, good, man. Ben, I want to, I think to avoid this video going crazy long, we should probably stop it somewhere around there, but we can
Yeah.
continue a conversation like this on another video in the future.
Mhm.
I just want to say thanks so much for tuning in, for joining us on the conversation. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, I really, really do appreciate it. And Ben, how can they find you?
We are on Instagram, isn't everyone? At TRC Outdoors.
Yeah.
Yeah, the S on the end is important, because
ERC
otherwise you get,
Outdoors. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
outdoors with the S. Otherwise you get the Redeemer Church, um, who are
Okay.
TRC Outdoor, but we are
Interesting.
TRC
Okay.
Outdoor.
Okay. I'll make sure I put a link. I'll put a link in the comment section and I'll put it in the description so it'd be easy to find. But yeah, that's I get questions about my hat almost not every video, but just about every single video with this redback spider here named Timmy.
Yeah,
I
that's
get
Timmy.
yeah, I get asked about this hat almost every single video, and this right here, Ben is the man responsible for making this hat. So that's where you can find the hat for future reference. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. Thank you, Ben, for joining us, and I cannot wait to see you guys on the next one.